potential. That's what you'll hear from players and developers of indie RPGs in this brand new podcast series, RPG Potential. I'm Cody Nokolo, and in this episode, I'm talking to Andrew and Brian Allenson. The Allenson brothers created Y2K, a postmodern RPG, and its brand new 1.5 update, coming very soon that changes a lot about the game. The demo for this new update releases free on Steam today, so try it as soon as you can. Welcome, Andrew and Brian, and thanks for being a part of the first episode. What are some of your favorite RPG games and why?
Okay, so it's definitely really hard to pick some because I just played like so many of them now. Lufia 2 will always be one of my favorites because of the way that it combines like the Zelda style dungeons like with the standard RPG. It just does it really well.
Yeah, Lufia 2 is a really great game. It just has a really cool atmosphere, and there's something just like so tight and fast about the battle system. Like the moment you select an attack, it happens immediately, and it feels really good to play. Final Fantasy IX is definitely one of my favorites. I love everything about Final Fantasy IX. I replayed it recently, and it was just as good as I remembered it being.
Yeah, 9 is just great.
I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3 right now. I'm so impressed by it. I've never really played many Western RPGs. I played a game called Lords of Magic on the PC in like maybe 2000, and that's like the closest I've really been to a Western RPG. I guess I did play Dragon Age Inquisition, but this is like my first experience with one, and I love it. It's excellent. It has a great battle system, and I love how much the role playing aspects come through not just in the battle system and how you build your characters, but also in the moment to moment decision making. I can't even fathom organizing that game. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's so huge. It's kind of mind-boggling. Now that we've talked about some of those RPGs you really like, did those games influence the trajectory of your own games, Y2K, from the beginning of development, or have any other recent games that you've played or recent RPGs influenced any of the development since you've started on the newest update?
Lufia 2 absolutely did. Final Fantasy 9 in some ways, but mainly because Final Fantasy 9 is like so baked into like my aesthetic DNA at this point that even if I'm not thinking about it, it's inspiring me.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I feel like a little bit of every RPG I've ever played definitely made its way into Y2K as we were working on it.
Yeah, I think strangely enough, the game that I kept drawing on was Final Fantasy 8, strangely enough, for IV. Um, Mainly for the new like locations that we built for the game. Just like every time I would have a new idea for one of the locations, it would also somehow be associated with a memory of me playing Final Fantasy VIII. So I think actually I was replaying Final Fantasy VIII just when we started working on IV, so that's probably why.
It makes a lot of sense that those games that you really like would coalesce into the stuff that you make. Moving on to another question about the RPG genre. RPGs tend to have a few different party member archetypes, like healers, and is there a specific character you think of from any game when you think of that specific archetype of party member?
I don't tend to personally think about it too much. If I pick like a favorite healer from an RPG, it's Celia from Wild Arms. I feel like the healer is probably like the most important character because you'd all be dead without them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, but I'll change my answer just to not be